Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on North Carolina's electric transportation transition. Thank you for joining us. My name is Stephen Lapp, and I'm a project manager with Advanced Energy, and I support a variety of our electric transportation projects. And I'm happy to serve as the moderator for today's discussion. This webinar is a part of Advanced Energy's Exploring North Carolina's Clean Energy Transition series, and it was formerly known as Exploring North Carolina's Smart Grid. Today's webinar is the 21st webinar since we began the series in 2017. It's the first webinar in 2023, and we have two more lined up for the rest of the year. For those who are not familiar with Advanced Energy, I want to take a minute to introduce the organization. We're a nonprofit energy consulting firm headquartered in Raleigh, North Carolina. We were founded back in 1980 by the North Carolina Utilities Commission. We work with electric utilities, government agencies, and a variety of public and private organizations in the residential, commercial, industrial, solar, motors and drives, and electric transportation markets. Our custom services include research, testing, training, consulting, and program design. And our members include Duke Energy, North Carolina's electric cooperatives, and Dominion Energy. Before we dive into the webinar today, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. We are using the Microsoft Teams webinar platform. So at any point, if you have a question or a comment, please submit it in the Q&A box. You can access this by clicking the Q&A button on your screen and select Ask Question to type your question and then click Post. And we will follow up with as many of your questions during the Q&A session following the presenters at the end of the webinar. And if we don't have time to get to them, we will make sure to follow up with you after the webinar. And I want to go ahead and thank folks for submitting questions during the registration process. We already have some good ones in mind. You will notice that the chat box has been disabled, so please do use the Q&A feature, as this allows us to track and follow up with the questions easier. This webinar is also being recorded and will be shared with everyone that registered. So if you need to log off for any reason or would like to reference it in the future, we will send it out and it will be posted on the Exploring North Carolina's Clean Energy Transition website. You can also review and reference any of our previous webinars on this site as well. At the end of the webinar, there will also be a participant satisfaction survey that we will share. So please take a few minutes to complete the survey. This will help us as we improve our webinars into the future. So I'd like to start off with a safety moment. So wherever you are, make sure you're in a safe place to listen, view, and participate in today's webinar. If you are driving, we prefer you find a safe place to pull over. Take a moment to be aware of your surroundings, remove any tripping hazards, be sure you know your exits and evacuation routes, and most importantly, take care of yourself and others. So the purpose of today's webinar is to understand the future potential of EV growth and development in North Carolina, explore the timing for implementation, how soon we may expect to see funding for infrastructure upgrades and customer or member programs, learn about the benefits and challenges, including impacts to the grid, rates, and energy equity, and share success stories on how to leverage and manage electric vehicles. So there are many policies, plans, funding programs, and strategies surrounding electric transportation right now. So we wanted to shed some light on the efforts at the state level and share how utilities are thinking about this, as well as share what North Carolina has already done to advance the state's electric transportation transition and discuss some of the things that are to come. We're joined by three great speakers today. You can kind of see them here. First, our first speaker is Paula Hemmer at the North Carolina Department of Transportation. She began her career as she began her environmental engineering career as a soil and groundwater consultant to private industry. She then switched to air quality, working as a consultant to EPA, state and local agencies, where she focused on cost-benefit analysis for air pollution controls and air emissions inventories. Paula began working for the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality in 2005 and functioned as a technical lead for clean energy, electricity, energy efficiency, and greenhouse gas issues, supporting a wide variety of projects. Paula was a significant contributor to the North Carolina Clean Energy Plan, the North Carolina Energy Reform Process, and the North Carolina Climate Change Risk Assessment and Resilience Plan. She recently moved to the Department of Transportation, where she is supporting clean and resilient transportation as well as other issues. She is North Carolina's project manager for the National Electrical Vehicle Infrastructure Grant Program, also referred to as NEVI. Paula has a BS in Aerospace Engineering and an MS in Environmental Engineering. Our second speaker today is Cory Gordon, who is the Director of Transportation Electrification at Duke Energy and has the honor of leading the team that pioneers electric vehicle programs across the company's footprint. Cory has worked in electrification projects since 2017 and joined the Transportation Electrification Organization full-time in the spring of 2020. Previously, Cory served in various roles in commercial and industrial energy efficiency programs for Duke after joining the company in 2010. Cory has worked in institutional HVAC systems, engineering, and in the design and thermal modeling of geothermal heat exchangers. He holds a master's degree in management science and engineering from Stanford University and a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Tennessee. Our third and final speaker today is Nikki Lynberg, who is a part of the Innovation and Business Development team at the North Carolina Electric Cooperatives, where she leads their electric transportation goals of bringing accessible electric transportation to the rural areas of North Carolina. This includes managing the cooperative's public charging network of nearly 100 chargers from the mountains to the coast. Nikki is a two-time North Carolina State University graduate with degrees in sustainability, supply chain, and analytics. Previously, she has helped over 50 companies work towards B Corp certification and is passionate about aligning economic growth with sustainability goals. So without further ado, I would like to turn over the presentation to our first speaker Paula Hemmer. So Paula, take it away.
Thank you, Stephen. I won't introduce myself again since that was such a great introduction. I will be discussing North Carolina clean transportation efforts that are housed in the Department of Transportation. I am unable to forward the slide.
And if you hit take
I have to take control. Sorry, I have to take control. There we go. Here we go. Sorry, I'm not sure what that popped up. Many of you have seen this slide before. These are the 3 executive orders that have to do with clean energy and specifically clean transportation. I'm not going to spend too much time on all of these executive order goals. However, I will say that we now have a target of 1.25 million electric vehicles by 2030. To support that, North Carolina Department of Transportation developed the Zero Emissions Vehicle Plan, and recently we submitted the Clean Transportation Plan, and we are currently working on a medium and heavy duty zero emission vehicle infrastructure needs assessment, and this is also in conjunction with DEQ's Advanced Clean Truck Rule that is currently in a rulemaking process. We'll discuss that rule a little later. And the needs assessment. First, I'd like to discuss the Clean Transportation Plan. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with it. It was released in April of 2023. Many of you know Jennifer Weiss, and she worked on this. She was the primary person that worked on this for Department of Transportation. The plan had an initial survey about clean transportation, and over 1,000 people completed that survey. So this is a very prominent issue in North Carolina. As you all know, it was a stakeholder developed plan, and that means the stakeholders have key decision making on the goals of the plan. For this plan, the stakeholders decided that it should be a plan for all of North Carolina, It should advocate for public, private, and nonprofit participation, and to include all layers of governance in transportation. There is federal highways and Department of Transportation funding and regulation. There is also North Carolina State Department of Transportation, as well as many regional planning organizations, both municipal and rural planning organizations. And lastly, there was a focus on equitable outcomes. Transportation, access to convenient and reliable transportation can be transforming to a low-income family. I think that's a really important aspect of transportation that we should all keep in mind. The Clean Transportation Plan had 5 work groups, including light-duty zero-emission vehicles, medium and heavy-duty ZEVs, fleet transition, and the equivalent of energy efficiency in the transportation sector is VMT, reduction, vehicle miles traveled reduction, and clean transportation infrastructure, which I'm sure you all are interested in. As I said, there were many, many stakeholders involved, and from many different types of aspects of transportation, including research and private industry. Transportation is in a period of great transition right now. Many new ideas, multimodal aspects of transportation are constantly being proposed and implemented. So this is a big transition, just as we saw in the electricity sector as well. Over 3,000 recommendations were developed by the stakeholders. This is kind of a summary of the recommendations. However, it does not reflect, the various recommendations that were made. This is kind of a high-level summary. One of the big ones was to create a dedicated clean transportation team, and that would most likely be housed in the Department of Transportation, and as well as a clean transportation interagency task force to work on cross-sector issues in transportation. Lastly, to partner with utilities to promote clean transportation is an important aspect of these recommendations. And of course, to evaluate the infrastructure needed to support fleet vehicles and other types of applications. Next, I'm going to move to funding of clean transportation. Under IIJA, there is significant amounts of money for the Department of Transportation. Many of it is to support infrastructure and infrastructure resilience. However, some of it is specifically oriented at clean transportation. There is the existing congestion mitigation and air quality program referred to as CMAQ. It's been around for years. Some of you may be familiar with it. And its focus is on both air quality and to reduce congestion. That pot of money has been expanded to be about $50 million per year for the next 5 years. There's also the carbon reduction program, which is very similar to CMAQ, but it's focused on reducing CO2 emissions from highway sources. And there's a large amount of money there, $171 million over 5 years. The next one is transit, which this translates into bus operators. So these would be local or regional bus operations. And it's to improve public transportation options. So it's a pretty broad goal for the program. And that amount of money that's going directly to North Carolina is $9 million over 5 years. I will say that a lot of the money in these programs goes to the regional planning organizations and not directly to DOT, and they're supposed to be used by the regional planning organizations. So they propose they propose grants that they want to apply for. Next is the NEVI program, which builds EV charging infrastructure along corridors and in communities. And we have $109 million to do this over 5 years. The first phase will be to build out major corridors. And once that is completed and Federal Highways deems that complete, we will be able to move on to community charging. There's also a lot of competitive funding, and this includes charging and fueling infrastructure, and there's $7.5 billion for that. We've submitted grants to get that funding from Federal Highways. There's low or no emission transit buses. We have 18,000 buses in North Carolina that could apply for grants under this program. There's one for buses and bus facilities to make them more amenable to the public, and there's $2 billion over 5 years for that. There's of course clean school buses, and that's under, I believe EPA that's the EPA program with $5 billion over 5 years. And of course there's many other programs: airports, ports, ferries, trains, multimodal, and of course big new ideas. So there's a lot of funding and a lot of opportunity out there. I'm going to go next to the NEVI program. I'm going to give you the current state of EVs in North Carolina first. Right now we have 66,000 ZEVs and plug-in hybrids registered in the North Carolina. We have a website that tracks this for the public because we get questions on it all the time. We believe that we are on track to meet at least the 80,000 sorry, ZEV target by 2025, given this curve, as well as the fact that the federal government under the Inflation Reduction Act is supporting rebates for electric vehicles, $7,500 for new vehicles and $4,500 for used electric vehicles. There's many level 2 and DC fast ports in North Carolina. I just pulled out the DC fast ports since that's what we're talking about here. And there are 789 ports as of May 2023. 70% of these ports have been installed by Tesla. Tesla is building large stations with 10 to 20 or more ports at each station. As you can see, we're building about 200 a year. Can you see that slide? On my screen, the slide is blank.
It's looking blank on our end as well.
Well, I'll step through this. It's a bunch of numbers. It's on, I can forward a slide of this if people want it. This just gives the requirements. As I said, these are DC fast charging stations. They have to be located within 1 mile of the corridor exit, so they're close by and convenient. Each station will be located 50 miles apart. So every 50 miles, if you're driving along I-40 or I-95, you should be able to find a charging port across the entire United States. So that is the goal of one of the goals of the program. Actually, I think I need to go to this slide. The stations are privately owned. Can you see this slide? The stations are privately owned and operated, yes, but must meet federal requirements for 5 years. And as I said before, we have to build out the corridors before we can move on to community charging. So we'd like to do this as efficiently as possible so that we can prop up some community charging. The goal of the NEVI program is to build an easily accessible charging stations for both regional and interstate travel, and to increase the network reliability. There's a lot of complaints about getting to the charging stations and the charging stations not being operable. So the NEVI program has a 97% uptime requirement on a per port basis, which is very difficult. There's also a lot of trouble with payment systems, so the NEVI program requires redundant payment systems. It requires an equitable distribution of benefits, Justice 40, many of you are familiar with that program, and so we have to understand where these traditionally disadvantaged communities are and how the program can benefit them. Primarily, we're looking at workforce development opportunities to prop up these communities. It's one of the biggest programs you may have heard of is Steps for Growth, run by NC A&T University as well as NC State University and a lot of the community colleges. And I would encourage you all to look into the Steps for Growth program. They are hiring interns and apprentices, which you all could hire. And NCDOT will be rolling out its own workforce development program as well. Let's see if this works now. Nope, it's still not working this slide. So like I said, they're DC fast chargers, 1 mile from the corridor, 50 miles apart. There are 4 ports that are required per station, and each of them must simultaneously deliver 150 kilowatts of power. So that's 600 kilowatts in total. The funding also allows for 5 years of operations and maintenance cost as well as capital costs. So that's a big plus for more rural sites or sites that will see less utilization, that we can help support electricity costs for these stations. The difficulty for many disadvantaged businesses in applying for the program is that it requires a 20% non-federal match of the funding. Hopefully you can see this slide. Good, that one's seeable. This is our proposed 50-mile requirement locations. This map is being published in our plan that's coming out as soon as FHWA approves it. We submitted it August 1st. This is proposed locations where we would place the chargers. This is a first public view of this map. We anticipate doing clusters of exits in these locations. So the dot represents the area in which the potential NEVI station will be located. We will have, let's just say for one exit, we may have 3 to 5 different, or one location, we may have 3 to 5 different exits along that portion of the corridor that qualify for the 50-mile spacing. And we would allow applications to be put in for any location along that that stretch of corridor, that cluster. So you may have one applicant doing it at exit 100 and another one doing it at exit 101, or another applicant doing it at exit number 103, so that there's some we can get a broad variety of applicants and hopefully get better sites for the program. There may be some questions on that. Like I said, we have 10 existing stations that meet NEVI requirements. We have 39 proposed stations, and we're asking for 3 exemptions on those stations. Most of those exemptions are, we find that there may be a better area to site the location if we stretch that location to 53 miles or something like that, as an example. The purple areas are showing where we have Justice 40 communities, and 10% of our EJ population lives within 2 miles of the corridor. Okay, I'm going to quickly go through these recent announcements on chargers. Tesla is opening up their what they call their North American charging standard to other automakers, and those are listed. SAE is fast tracking the standardization of the charger, and we believe that many charging networks and equipment manufacturers will adopt this technology. 7 automakers also recently announced plans to build their own network of about 30,000 DCF fast charging ports by 2030, and those companies are listed below. The ports will be in urban areas and along major corridors, and will have both types of connectors. I'm going to move on to the needs assessment. The medium and heavy duty needs, infrastructure needs assessment is being conducted currently. Like I said, this is some preview of the report. We did a survey of the trucking industry to get a feel for what they felt the immediate needs in 2027 to 2035 timeframe would be. They stated that the industry is very risk averse, and that a lot of distributors support just-in-time delivery, that the transporters would need to meet these requirements. The executive order discusses the need for public charging by medium and heavy-duty vehicles. However, the fleets need guaranteed charging at specific times and places. Therefore, our results indicate that The fleet transition will be preferring depot charging with internal control of charging times and places rather than this public NEVI-like infrastructure for trucking in the near term. These are some preliminary numbers. We may update this based on DEQ's more recent rule penetration numbers. So under the Advanced Clean Truck Rule, there is a percentage of sales of electric vehicles required by manufacturers that sell vehicles in North Carolina, and it's on a percentage of sales basis. So it starts in 2035, and the rule is being assessed through 2035, and it's broken into 3 different vehicle classes and weights, and you can see those in the chart. There's more information on the Advanced Clean Truck Rule at the Department of Environmental Quality's website using that link. Using these rule penetration numbers, DOT estimated that the number of level 2 chargers that would be required by 2030 would be about 25,000 level 2 chargers and 100,000 level 2 chargers by 2035. In DC fast charging is a little less because primarily the need for depot charging will be at night, overnight, in these early stages of this transition. So we believe about 30,000 DC fast chargers will be needed by 2030 and about 60,000 by 2035. We also are producing a map. There are several different data sets we're using to produce this map, and this map shows where medium and heavy-duty vehicles are located and where their destinations and their trip starts are located. So this is primarily where they would be charging at. And the bright green spots are where the most charging will be taking place. And you can see that these are along major corridors, Charlotte, I-77 and I-85 interchange, and the Statesville I-77 and I-40 interchange, and Greensboro, the I-40 and I-85 interchange. And up there and at the top of the map is roughly Mount Airy area with the I-87 and I-74 interchanges. And there's also some need for charging in the Raleigh area. I-95 is, for whatever reason, is not a major start-stop location along I-95. Those starts and stops happen to the north or south of us. So there's not a lot of trip starts and stops along I-95 for whatever reason. I asked them also for you all to produce a preliminary electric demand estimate. So this is for you all, especially for you. So we did 3 scenarios of charging with low, medium, and higher levels of charging, from 5 to 6 nights of charging required per week, and anywhere from 20 to 70% of the battery being charged to 20 to 100% of the battery being charged. And we came up with these scenarios. The middle scenario is about 3.5 million megawatts of charging, megawatt hours, sorry, of charging. And most of that charging, 78% of that charging, would be done at night, overnight. So that's what we need to add to the existing grid in order to support this. And of course, it's at night, making solar not an option. It's always a little more hard than we think. And that's my presentation. And now we're going to hand it over to Cory. Cory Gordon with Duke Energy.
Good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can see and hear me okay. I am Cory Gordon with Duke Energy. I have the pleasure of leading the team that delivers customer-facing electric vehicle programs to the state of North Carolina, as well as our other territories. It's great to be on with you today. So you've heard a lot from Paula about what's going on in, well, I should rephrase, you've heard from Paula about a lot of things going on in the state of North Carolina when it comes to electric vehicles. And, you know, we have often found that that volume of things, not just in North Carolina, but everywhere can be overwhelming. And so while we know that our role in electrification is expansive and our obligations are many, one of the things that we've done is taken an opportunity to give ourselves a bit of a rubric, if you will, to think about, you know, what our role is as an electric utility in this transition. And so there's really three things that we think about. And I'm going to spend some time talking to you about two of those in some depth today. But the first thing that we think about is simplifying adoption with innovative customer programs. And so we want to be able to offer to our customers, you know, functionality, whether it is in the form of financial assistance or in, you know, removing other barriers in terms of education and comfort to help customers, you know, pursue electrification that's beneficial to all. The second thing that we want to do is to deliver really a menu of electric vehicle load management programs so that customers with different lifestyles and different needs are able to help us in you know, managing the EV load as it's added to the grid. Finally, we also know that one of the things that's important is that we think about places on our grid and out in the world where electric vehicles will cluster or where we'll see high load growth, and be able to think about those in a proactive way. So we'll start first with one of our adoption simplifying programs. Really the thing that, you know, I would start with here is we have attempted to break down what I think of as the EV charging infrastructure stack. So starting on the left of this slide, as is the case with all electric loads, utilities have an obligation to serve. Typically that's done from the distribution system. And utilities do this with, you know, long established and formulaic line extension cost policies. And what we've been able to do at Duke is leverage the concepts and the underlying structure of those policies to deliver a program called Charger Prep Credit. That is a program that helps customers fund infrastructure behind the meter that they own. And for those that are not steeped in EV lingo, we've got a make-ready definition up here. Make-ready is just an industry term for infrastructure that brings power from a source to the EV charging hardware itself. Make-ready, excuse me, I had a pop-up there. So the Make-ready program, the Charger Prep program, excludes the EVSE itself. And so it does not fund the actual EV charging hardware. And so that's, you know, a place where we make another delineation in the infrastructure stack at the charger itself. So let's talk a little bit about some highlights of that program. So I mentioned that the program leverages concepts that are used in line extension. And that's the utility rate making accounting that makes the program viable. But from a customer facing perspective, Charger Prep Credit really works like an incentive program. The program has been live for about 14 months now. And so we do have some highlights of it that we can share. The first of those, you heard from Paula about the NEVI program, about the need for private funding to account for 20% of a station's total cost. And one of the great things about Charger Prep Credit is that it is complementary to other funding sources such as those funds from NEVI, but also from NCDEQ, EPA school bus funds, and things that are similar to that. The program has been successful in supporting the much needed DC fast charging sites that are being deployed in the state. And you can see there that, the per site contribution from the program is not insignificant. And so we've been thrilled to see that participation take off, particularly in 2023. North Carolina policy is pushing a lot of EV adoption, and we're proud that this program can support it. We have served over 4,000 homes with the PREP credit program since its inception, and not quite 10% of the customers that use the program are also leveraging a contractor that is not paid for by Duke Energy, but that is provided or really introduced to the homeowner by Duke Energy and by the program. And we included that option so that customers that don't have an electrician that they rely on regularly can source one and feel that they're going to get a reliable and safe installation. Finally, this program has broad applicability. We have seen not only public level 2 charging in single family homes, DC fast, but we're also serving fleets, which is an important component of electrification for a number of reasons. And we have participation from multifamily dwellings. And so we're helping to get charging infrastructure into places that serve all demographics of the state. So also wanted to talk today about our menu of managed charging options. We start that discussion with the simplest of those options, and we call that off-peak credit. This is a program that certainly we hope will be available in North Carolina soon. Off-peak credit is a program where we've really been able to demonstrate a lot of success, not only in terms of enrollment, but in terms of shifting load. The graph you see on the screen here is an example from another jurisdiction where we've had such a program. And what you can see is that about 80% of summer peak load from pre-enrollment to post-enrollment has been reduced. So we're really excited about how simple really it is to get those results. The way that off-peak charging or off-peak credit rather works is we offer a fixed monthly credit to participating customers and simply ask them to avoid charging during on-peak windows. They do actually have to charge at some point, of course. They can't simply not charge. But customers really have options, right? They can decide how they want to control their charging, whether they use the EV itself, they use a programmable or smart charger, or even manage to do that manually. We really leave that up to the customer themselves. Generally, we allow for a small number of what we call strikes. Often it's 3 and you're out, meaning you lose your credit for the month. But what doesn't happen is that in any event, we bill the customer more. So this program is, all benefit, right? It's all carrot versus stick. Moving to a second option for managed charging, we look at time of use rates. These options are slightly more complicated than an off-peak credit style program. The reason for that is that because in addition to having windows in which customers can charge and save money, there are also windows when energy is more expensive. Generally, customers can save, at least some customers can save money just by switching to a time of use rate and without any change in behavior. But because EV charging in particular is so flexible, customers are able to leverage discount periods within the rates for at least the majority of their charging needs. The dials that you see on the screen are representative, but one of the things that has struck me about the dials here is that there are discount periods during the day. What that means is that those that work from home, for example, have multiple windows to get discounted rates. Certainly, we are seeing more hybrid and remote employees in the state's workforce these days. And so again, we're thrilled that TOU rates provide some optionality really for those that are eager for that optionality and are willing to manage a little bit of complexity to get it. The final type of program that we envision at Duke for managing EV loads in a residential setting is what we call active managed charging. Active managed charging is a lot like demand response, if you're familiar with that concept. Demand response is a situation where a utility can often, quote, reach in and curtail certain non-critical loads. And active charging can work in that way, but we also expect that active charging will involve not only turning loads off, but for example, perhaps turning them on during times of excess renewable generation. We're fortunate to have a version of active managed charging that will open for enrollment in North Carolina next month. This version includes a subscription feature. So in addition to testing active managed charging, we aim to test the attractiveness and feasibility of customers getting a flat rate that covers very large amounts of EV charging at home. In exchange, we asked them to do a couple things. One is to passively manage charging by creating schedules that avoid on-peak periods during weekdays and non-holidays, but also that incorporate that customer's charging needs. And so one thing you can see about active charging management is that it goes a little bit further than the last two structures because it begins to anticipate what a customer actually needs on a regular basis and works from those specifics to orchestrate their charging relative to the needs of the system as a whole. The second thing that we ask customers to do is to allow us to actively manage their charging based on system conditions. And so, for example, the company will call up to 3 curtailment or stop charging events per month. Customers are given 12 hours notice of those events, and they last no more than 4 hours. And so customers can anticipate those and still ensure that they get the charge they need to go about their daily lives. Meanwhile, we avoid adding further strain to the system during time periods when it's already experiencing strain because of extreme weather and things like that. We've been fortunate that 3 automotive OEMs saw fit to participate in this program and to help us work with our mutual customers. They're going to be the median through which we perform that active managed charging, reaching out through those companies' telematics systems. And so we're really excited to test the future of active managed charging, and we're excited for this program to get going next month. That is all I have for you today, and so I will turn it over to Nikki.
Thank you, Cory. Excited to be here and to be talking about this topic with everyone. So I just want to talk about a few projects that we have going on with the North Carolina Electric Cooperatives in the electric transportation space. So we really want to make sure that our electric transportation programs are meeting our goals of building a brighter future, and that's built on 3 pillars: reliability and innovation, sustainable, affordable energy, and local community support. So every time we are working on a pilot or a program or developing that out, we really check in to make sure it's aligning with these goals. We know reliability is a really big question around electric transportation. So in everything we do, we want to make sure that's front of mind. And so electric vehicles we see as the largest opportunity for beneficial electrification. If you're not familiar with that term, it is a lot of syllables, but it dwindles down into trying to meet one of these 4 pillars without negatively impacting another. So for instance, for electric vehicles, although upfront costs are high right now, over time of the lifetime of the vehicles, electric vehicles save consumers money. They're zero tailpipe emissions, so it benefits the environment and reduces greenhouse gases. It has the opportunity to form a more robust and resilient grid. I like what Cory was saying. If we are able to leverage the excess renewables on the system, that's a great thing for the grid. And if we're charging overnight, then we're using our resources more effectively, and that can lower overall system costs. And then improves the product quality or consumer quality of life. So one example that we like to talk about here is if you're a school bus driver idling in neighborhoods, you don't have that excess noise or emissions going into that neighborhood. And if you're idling in the drive-through lane of a fast food restaurant, you're not negatively impacting the health of those workers or yourself. So at the beginning, we talked about some of the objectives of this meeting or this webinar. And one thing that we really want to talk about is the rural perspective. We see a lot of this adoption going into the urban areas as we expected with electric transportation, but it is slowly starting to get out into the rural areas, and we are seeing, even though it's still slow adoption, it's picking up quickly. So this is a look at the market share of electric vehicles for new vehicle sales in North Carolina in the earlier part of last year. So as you can see, it's mainly concentrated around some of the urban centers in North Carolina, but is kind of spreading out slowly from those areas. But if we look forward on the next slide to this year, in the first half of this year, we see that yellow section, that's the section that's seeing high adoption. It is moving out quickly. And overall in the state, EV market share is just increasing as a whole. So I think there was questions for a few years on when this was going to come and how quickly it was going to come. And I think we are really starting to see those numbers pick up. And with the state's goals, I think, as we mentioned, the 2025 goal is coming up soon, and that we are on target to meet those goals. So for our pilots and programs, really the objective of my group in innovation and business development is to look at technologies that may be beneficial for our members and their member consumers, and look at those in a concentrated setting and make sure it makes sense for our members, the technology is performing as expected, and then if we see that that's successful at the end of the program or the pilot, then we roll that out to our other members. So the co-ops have 26 distribution co-ops throughout the state. So typically with these pilots, we focus on 1 or 2 co-ops at the beginning to see how the technology is working for them, and then we roll it out to more co-ops over time. And some of these may be regional based, so that's the benefit of having your local distribution co-op. So something that may work in the eastern part of the state and may not work in the western part of the state, we have that opportunity to be flexible in that decision. So I don't know if we'll have time for all 5 of these pilots, but I'm just going to talk through the first 2 pretty more in depth, and then the next few we can just talk about quickly. And if you have any follow-up questions, I'm happy to meet offline to talk through those further. So back in about 2016, we really saw that the investments for electric vehicle charging was happening in the rural area or in the urban areas. And as most of our members serve the rural areas, we wanted to make sure they were not left behind in this part of the energy transition. So our statewide organization funded $1 million to deploy 21 chargers, public-facing chargers throughout the state. And then that was shortly followed by the Volkswagen settlement phase 1, where we were funded for more charging throughout the state. And that has been followed by other funding sources as well. And as of today, we're right around 100 chargers throughout the state. About 30 of those are fast chargers, and about 70 of those are level 2. And these can be found in a variety of different types of areas, shopping centers, gas stations, some of our cooperative offices, tourism attractions, state parks, those types of things. And we've really learned a lot through deploying these stations. We've learned a lot about the utilization. We've learned a lot about how to price the stations. And we've just really learned about how seasonal some of these can be, whether you're in the more in the mountains or more in the coast. But it's been a really great learning opportunity for us and our co-ops. So our next pilot that I want to touch on, Cory kind of hit some of the highlights with the managed charging and what the benefits are. I do have a link on this slide to why using vehicle telematics as opposed to some other managed charging solutions may be more beneficial in the long term. Of course, there are options depending on what your needs are, but we are working on this managed charging pilot using vehicle telematics. So going into the vehicle's computer through the OEM cloud to either actively or passively manage the charging of the vehicle. So we are working with 2 different co-ops in the state, Union Power Cooperative, which is located outside of Charlotte, and then Wake Electric, which is in the northern part of Wake County and a little bit further north as well. And so each of these pilots is going to be structured a little bit differently, so we can just learn more about how to structure these programs in the future. But for this project, we are working with a vendor called WeaveGrid, and they are the ones that are going to talk directly to the automakers, and be able to send those signals to the vehicles. So this is kicking off sometime in the next quarter, and we are really looking forward to understanding how this technology works and how it can be effectively used at different co-ops. This is a very new technology. There are a few utilities already doing it in the country, but it is still a very new technology. So I think it'll take a few years to fully scale this up, but I think there is so much opportunity in this space for the managed charging. So one other pilot that we're looking at more for a commercial type account or an industrial type account is electric truck refrigeration units. So these are, even though it says electric, these are hybrid units. So this image of this truck, there is a refrigeration unit on the back of the trailer there, or on the front of the trailer there. And when that's traveling on the road, that is running diesel. But many new units have the opportunity to be plugged into the grid when they are stationed and idling at their distribution centers. So we worked with a pilot with a company called Holler and Green up in Mount Airy, North Carolina, and this has been a great opportunity for them to reduce their emissions, get great deals with who they supply to because they are meeting their sustainability goals. And it's just a lot less noise and a lot less cost in the end for them when they're running these at their sites. We talked a little bit about heavy duty transportation. So you've probably seen some of the news out there about the EPA funded Clean School Bus program. The Volkswagen settlement also funded many electric school buses. So we have been working with Randolph County which is the first public school deployed school bus in the state of North Carolina. And we've gotten really positive feedback for this and are really looking forward to seeing how this operates over the long term and just seeing how this scales up to the state as a whole. And our last one that we're working on, this is a newer project that we're working on, is an electric tractor pilot. So there's so many good applications for electric tractors, especially if you're working with a customer who has an operation that may be sensitive to emissions, such as working with animals or a crop that is highly sensitive. So we are working with the North Carolina Zoo to pilot one of these electric tractors. That should be happening sometime in the later part of this year. And we are looking forward to seeing how that operates in the field. We have not, they are deployed out in California and some other states, but we're looking forward to seeing how it operates in the North Carolina landscape. So I know I went through some of those kind of quickly, but wanted to make sure we saved a few minutes for questions, and happy to connect offline if there's further questions. Thank you.
Yep, thank you all. That was a lot of great information. So at this point, we want to take a few minutes for if all of our speakers can come back on camera for questions that came through during the webinar as well as through the registration process. We may not have time to address all of the questions, but we will be sure to follow up with you after or connect you with the right resources to follow up with your questions. So taking a look at some of them that we have already. In this, so how are the utilities working with state agencies like NCDOT for a successful NEVI rollout, or in general for a successful charging deployment? So maybe we can start with the utilities on this first, and then transition to DOT's perspective.
Sure, Stephen, or Nikki, do you want to take it, or I'm happy to take a shot and then hand it to you?
That works. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. So at Duke, we see, NEVI really as a good opportunity for the market to go and deploy, foundational infrastructure that we all know is needed. And, we see our role then as really one of support. So we've been engaged with Paula and with others at NCDOT really throughout their process, and have helped to share with them things that we know about fast charging deployments, not only from our efforts in North Carolina, but from other states, and really to highlight sort of, some pitfalls and best practices. I think for us, maybe the next step, right, an important one, and one that I know is on the minds of those that are looking to bid on the sites in North Carolina, is to review where sites are targeted, now that information is coming out, and potentially rule out problematic areas, or help Paula and her teammates rule out problematic areas. Understand if there are critical locations that we need to start thinking about, more proactively, and really do all of this to create efficiency, for NCDOT, for ourselves, and for those, companies out in the market that are looking to bid on the sites. So that's how we're thinking about it. Nikki?
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with what you said there. And just in terms of how we're working together, I think it's such an interesting time because this is a new space for everyone, and we're still trying to figure out the best way to communicate with each other. But I think that what we've just seen over the last couple of years is that just transparency is key to making sure that we are all working towards the same goal. So we've had lots of conversations with DOT, and we ask them lots of questions and they ask us lots of questions, and sometimes the answer to those questions is I don't know, but I think that's an important conversation to have, because we can get those answers, but we just want to make sure that we are in alignment on what makes the most sense moving forward. And then beyond that, I know Paula mentioned it briefly, but we've also worked with DOT directly on applying for the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Program, a grant, and that is to pilot a battery supported fast charging application, which I think just trying out these new technologies in addition to building that larger infrastructure has been a great part of working with DOT.
And I'll go next. One of the big things that people ask is, about the mapping of the locations, and we can't be, and sharing all that with the utilities. We have to be careful with doing that, because once we share it with utilities can actually bid on these sites as well. As you've seen, the co-ops in particular are putting out a lot of the stations themselves. So they can bid on the NEVI stations as well. So we have to make sure that we're not giving them any proprietary information that would give them advantage during the bidding process, while at the same time trying to facilitate potentially 39 sites, 10 applications each, and all of these people knocking on the doors of the utilities asking, does my site have sufficient power for 600 kilowatts? So it is a tricky situation that we're in, and we're working to get those, we've released this preliminary map so you can figure out if potentially you're in the in the target zone for some of those. Some of those areas are going to be very wide, and some of them are going to be very narrow. So those points along the map are pretty nebulous still at this point, but it gives you an idea. So, you know, I think one of the other things that people are looking for is somehow coordinating solar and storage and all these aspects into these NEVI stations. However, you know, the money for the utility has to supply power to the stations, and so a NEVI applicant could not build solar onto that, or you know, some other form of generation onto that site and generate the power for that site themselves. So that's by law, and we can't change that. So a lot of people want to see us coordinate with the utilities on that, and unfortunately it's not possible. However, the battery is I believe supportive of that, and we can probably, you know, we can look at batteries for peak shaving.
Well, thank you all, and I apologize we didn't get to more questions, but we had a lot of good information discussed by our speakers. Again, we will follow up with you in the next couple of days on any lingering questions. And at this time, you'll see the participation satisfaction survey in the chat if you would take some time to respond to that. Before we end, I do want to give a great thank you to our wonderful speakers today, Paula, Cory, and Nikki, for taking their time and sharing their expertise with folks here online and for folks who will reference this in the future. So thank you very much for your time and expertise today, as well as thank you all for joining us in this webinar today. We're grateful you chose to take your time out of your day to participate, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.